to Femme Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and today we are doing a slay-by-slay breakdown of Season 2, Episode 5 of The Last of Us, titled Feel Her Love, written by Craig Mazin, directed by Stephen Williams. Before we trepidatiously explore Level B2, let me tell you how you can follow the pod. You can subscribe on Spotify or wherever you may get your podcasts. You can also watch video breakdowns on Spotify and on YouTube. You can follow the pod on Instagram at Femme Furious Pod. And if you would like to send an email, if you have thoughts, opinions, feelings about this episode of television, please, the inbox is open. You can send those emails over to femmeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. You can also join the Two Femme, Two Furious community. It's $10 a month, and it will get you fully loaded bonus episodes. You will also get a 15% discount on merch and live events, Sunday Brunch, which is a virtual monthly hangout, the Suffragette Award, which gives you voting privileges on content, and more. You will also get Tea Time, which is the online chat, and Fast Five, which is a weekly content roundup. Okay, let's jump into this week's Femme Frame, where we will dive into key feminist themes, cultural context, herstory, and more. Here is your spoiler warning. If you have not seen this episode of television, I would just recommend that you pop off, go watch it, and then join me when you're ready. We will be here as a podcast, as a community, when you have watched the episode. But we are talking about spoilers throughout this episode of television. And now that we've covered that, a thorough spoiler warning, here is the synopsis for this episode of TV. An episode that is truly for the Femme Furious. This episode dives into Ellie's continued quest for vengeance, and even some quenching of that vengeance. We are introduced to spores galore, and we see what kind of sacrifices are made across the board when this information is discovered. Ellie and Dina encounter some stalkers. The turf war between the Scars and the WLF progresses, and Dina becomes collateral damage in this turf war, forcing her and Ellie to separate. All right, let's dive into our key feminist theme of this episode, which is masculinity as it pertains to Ellie. In episode 9, Look to the Light, when Joel and Ellie are walking along and they're sort of having this reconciliation of their relationship and what it means to them and how profound it has been between the two of them, Joel starts to open up to Ellie about Sarah. And he goes on to say, she was very girly, and then he gets sort of defensive, and he's like, not that you're not girly, and Ellie, sort of bites back, and she's like, well, I'm not, and they end up having this whole conversation, and this is one of the highlights that was really prominent in season 1, is this discrepancy between Ellie and Sarah, and that Sarah is afforded the ability in just circumstances and in life to be a feminine, dainty girl and to explore this part of herself and not really have anything that is forcing her into a position of survival. Not in the same way that Ellie is, for sure. Ellie is sort of stark to that because she's born in the after times. She's never been in a world where she hasn't had to fend for herself in some capacity. It's a dog-eat-dog world out in the apocalypse, or like a mushroom-eat-mushroom. I'm not really sure what language we're using there. And because of this, because the world in the apocalypse is so cruel, is so violent, and breeds the need to be in survival mode all the time, the need to constantly protect oneself, forces Ellie into a position to not be able to express her femininity in the same context that Sarah would have been able to. Now, this also is just not who Ellie is. Ellie is a queer character born in a period of time where the world has been frozen over. And Craig Mazin talks about this often after the episodes and in the official podcast that the world in 2003 was not as queer friendly as it is now in 2025. And it's very hard for me, a queer friendly and queer person, to turn the part of my brain off that is just so accepting of this thing. I've mentioned this before and I'll say it again. Like, I grew up doing musical theater. Everyone I knew was queer. Everyone I knew was campy. Everyone I knew that was in my immediate community was open to the idea of what it was to be queer, what it is to be queer, even when I was younger, because this was something I've done since elementary school. Having been so saturated in my own experience of queer culture, it doesn't even cross my mind that, like, oh, of course in 2003, not everybody was open to this. It is before we had the Defense of Marriage Act, where queer people had the right to marry, giving LGBTQ people the right to marry here. And the world hadn't progressed to the point where we have seen it at this point. And it's hard in my brain to reconcile these things. But if we go with what Craig Mazin always talks about, which is the world stopped in 2003. And that in 2003, there was not this open opportunity to be queer in the way that we have it today. We don't get the fullness of gender expression, even in how it has transformed over the years. So in 2003, as the world stops and is experiencing queer culture just in 2003, we don't have this expansion of non-binary. We don't have this expansion of pronouns and gender identity in the same way that we do today. And so if we're going back and we're sort of looking at queer culture as Dragonfly and Amber from 2003, we get this very limited understanding of what it is to be queer and the very narrow paths at that period of time that were afforded to the queer culture to be able to experience their gender identity in full. And I think anybody who is present and open-minded in 2025, our present 2025, I think we can understand that we are all myriad shades of gender expression. Like, there are many, many days that a person who I would say conventionally gender expresses as very feminine. There are days when I wake up and I don't want to wear a dress, or I don't want to wear a skirt, or I don't want to wear makeup or do all of these things that are gender normative to femininity. At least how we have described it societally now. And I think we are in a period of time in society where we are sort of breaking from the idea of what it is to be normative in any of these gender expressions. And I said that, for those of you who are just listening, I said normative with air quotes, because there is nothing normative about gender. It's a societal construct. It looks different all over the globe. It looks different in different cultures. And this is what is so fascinating about watching a show like this, exploring these concepts of gender expression with an actor like Bella Ramsey, who is non-binary, who has they/them pronouns, move through a character like Ellie, who is not, comparative to her peers that we've seen so far being Dina and Sarah, who are much more feminine characters, having to figure out what the gender expression and identity is. And because Ellie is who she doesn't give a fuck. So last episode, when Dina says, you're brave to be so forward with who you are and be so comfortable in it, Ellie responds with, I'm not brave. I'm just obvious. And this is such a stake in the ground moment for me as far as like the queer expression of what is happening in the show. And so I think it's interesting to bring it back that Ellie just automatically takes on this role of masculinity. And is some of that triggered by her gender expression, or is some of that just triggered by the loss of Joel and feeling that she has to take on the mantle of what it is that he was? She's fulfilling his legacy to a certain capacity. And obviously this isn't what is discussed or fleshed out so fully or so on the nose. It's layered, just like it's layered in real life when we are figuring out our gender expression and identity and how we want to default into the different spaces of gender that are available to us at all times. So I'm not sure if this is Ellie just being a more masc-leaning lesbian, or is this a part of her grief and her need to be the provider and be all of the things that Joel was to her when she's looking at Dina, a more sensitive, again, femme normative character who has been caretaking for her, who has been nurturing her, who has been almost sometimes infantilizing or parentalizing her in a way of like coaxing her off the ledge with this very maternal touch that she has, and then being put in the position of mother by being pregnant. And I think this is really interesting because if you go back to season 1 to episode 3, where we get the Bill and Frank episode, when Bill leaves his note to Joel, he's like, we have one purpose, and that purpose is to protect the people that we love and care about. That's our job. That's our role. And Joel does this throughout all of season 1. We see it with Ellie. We see that he tries to protect Tommy. We know that he tries to protect Tess the best that he can. And now, with Joel gone, there's no protector. So who takes that up? Well, it's Ellie. And this is her sole role now. This is her internal responsibility. It's not just being driven by her vengeance, but it is her innate need now to fulfill what Joel has shown her, which is to be the protector for the people that you love and care about. And she's in this thing with Dina. Like, their relationship might be new, but her saying, I'm going to be a dad, is like, we're doing this together. We're about to have a family. It's not hers. It's Jesse's. He doesn't know that yet. But Ellie's all the way in on this. Ellie's like ready to have a child of her own. And so as this father figure, which I talked about this a little bit last episode, but like taking on this mantle of fatherhood after she's just lost her father in a violent, tragic, graphic way, traumatizing way, she's consciously or subconsciously taking on this role of masculinity and what Joel was and what a father is and what the role of father is for her future with Dina and with this baby. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later in the Slay by Slay. But I found this to be really fascinating because there is a moment in this episode where Ellie can't protect Dina, and who comes to the rescue but Jesse. And this is a fascinating exploration of gender and gender roles and masculinity in queer/lesbian culture, because Bella in the after episode says that her and Jesse are now in a position of challenging each other's masculinity. And this is something I really want to keep in the back of mind as we travel through the rest of the season, because we're nearing the end. We have 2 episodes left, which is wild to think about. But 2 episodes left to see how this experience of what Ellie as a masculine presenting woman is in this world and what that will mean for this throuple situation that we are going to get between Dina, Jesse, and Ellie. And now we'll dive into our slay by slay breakdown where we go scene by scene and we sort of talk about everything that happened throughout this episode. So we have scene 1, which I've titled Spores Galore, and we see this woman who has recruited Isaac from last episode, who says, "Welcome to the fight," or "Welcome to the revolution, Violet." Anyway, sorry, that's for my bookish girlies. And we get some of my favorite stuff in The Last of Us, which is just conversations, character moments, development. A lot of my favorite stuff from season 1 was the cold opens. We would get these sort of one-off deviations that would give us some backstory or some information. And this cold open with these two women having a conversation over cigarettes was so reminiscent of exactly what it is that I loved about season 1. And in their conversation over cigarettes, we get this understanding that there are multiple levels of basement underneath this hospital. She says B1 is empty. There was nothing down there. B2, they go down there. They figure it's infected. They've dealt with infected before. Only to discover that it's now airborne. And because these people are military, because they are intellectuals, medical professionals even, she goes, "Well, I know that it's not coming up through the vents because otherwise we would have been infected weeks ago. So they told us to seal them in. All of these people who went down there to fight the infected, to clear the basement so they could use the basement for whatever it is that they were going to use it for." And she seals them in. At the end, this woman who has now recruited Isaac gets up to leave and she goes, "I'm sorry about your son." And this was like a gut punch to me. I was so despondent for this woman who had to make this choice to literally lock her son in to an airborne infection of spores galore with these other people who went down there to clear the basement, and now this is what's happening on B2. And we know that there's also a B3. We don't know what's going to happen down there, though I will say I have some suspicions from watching a walkthrough of the game. I'm sure we will not be seeing that this season, but I can guarantee we will be seeing B3 in season 3. And I guarantee you, I'm making a bet right now that the name of the episode, the title of that episode, will be B3. Now, this is also interesting because this cold open gives us information about spores and that this virus that we know is mutating, and we know this because we've seen stalkers who are very different type of infected from clickers and bloaters and things like that. Because of this, spores changes the experience of threat that we have as we move through Seattle. We've not seen this anywhere else. We don't know if this is happening anywhere else, but we know that here in Seattle, this is how the infected are mutating and growing and changing. That now there is a type of infected that just breathe spores out into the world, and that creates more cordyceps because when we go down to B2 later, it's covered from head to toe in mushrooms. In the after the episode, Neil Druckmann says that, oh, this woman was in the same conundrum that Joel was in because Joel was being put in a position to have to save Ellie and the choice that he made, and this woman could have saved her son, and this was the choice that she made. And I would like to argue and say this is not true because Ellie's life was threatened by humans and by science and by real people with a real agenda to kill her in the name of progressive science. Fine. This person who goes down and experiences the spores is now infected with cordyceps. Definitively. They know this. They start coughing. It's more visceral. We see twitching almost immediately. We see coughing. So we know that they are immediately infected. He knows that he's immediately infected. That's why he says, seal us in. This is it. This is what we've become now. So I would say they're different because one is a lost cause. This is it. that person is infected, they're all infected. Ellie was not a lost cause. Ellie was not lost to this thing already. Ellie was not already so far gone in her infection or infected at all. I understand what they were saying when they're saying like they're put in the same position, like you either save all of humanity or you save your son, like you get your son out of there, but you infect everyone else with these spores and now it's in the air. Or you seal them in and you protect humanity, and like same thing, like Joel could have saved humanity by letting them kill Ellie. And are they willing to make that sacrifice? So I understand what they're trying to do when they say that they're making a comp here, but it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel as weighted, and maybe that's just because we like Ellie and Joel and we don't know these people from the cold opening. But what happens with Ellie is so much more speculative because we don't actually know if that thing that they were about to do, if just killing her and slicing her brain open was the only way to create a vaccine, and in fact could have been a really stupid thing because she is the only person who's immune that we know of. And if that is the case and killing her didn't create the vaccine, now they have nothing. And then we jump to scene 2, which I've titled The Morning After, which is this really lovely experience that Ellie and Dina had last episode of falling in love, and they have sex, and good for them, by the way. I will say this all the time. I said it last week. I'll say it again. We should be having as much sex as possible in the apocalypse. Just saying. I'm just saying. The morning after, we get this view of Dina making the triangulation. She's listening to the radio. She's sort of trying to figure out their position. And she says it would be easier if I had a protractor. And then Ellie's like, oh, well, funny thing is, I brought one. And Dina's like, really? And she's like, no, I don't even know what a protractor is. Which makes sense to me because what is the education system going on in the apocalypse? And why are we teaching people to use a protractor in the apocalypse? Why? Are we learning how to count nickels and quarters and dimes in the apocalypse? Why is this the math that we are learning? How, on God's green earth, as Mother Earth takes back over everything that humanity has ever touched in this television show, how is it that we have enough protractors to teach people in any given area? I have a lot of qualms with how they have progressed society in the apocalypse in this season. This was not the same last season. I'm not saying there's no education. We know that there is. We've seen Ellie in Fedra school. And this is another thing that really bothers me. They're making Ellie seem much more dumb than she was last season. Season 1, she is a smart character. She's got her wiles about her. She pays attention to other people and what they're doing. She cracks the code, Bill and Frank's code, with Joel, like within a few hours, if not even like almost immediately. And she's strategic. And we watched all of that in season 1. And in season 2, it just appears to me like they're making her seem that she is not as smart as she is in order to make Dina seem like the more intelligent one. And I don't understand this because why can't they both be smart? Ellie went to school in a Fedra operated school. So, okay, fine. The education is very specific and geared towards creating Fedra soldiers, but wouldn't these people in Fedra schools have access to a better education? I could be wrong about that. Maybe a little classist in its own way in the apocalypse, but to me it seems like Fedra is the most, I don't want to say funded because probably not funded, but seems like the organization primed with the most resources in the apocalypse. So to me, it seems like Ellie would have a better education than most people. Now, again, I don't know. I have no idea what they're doing in the apocalypse, but we don't see a school in these QZs in other ways outside of Fedra We've only ever seen a Fedra school, and we know that they are in a legitimate school. They're running laps around in the gym. And I'm not sure what other communities are doing, because we've seen like a pretty advanced community in Jackson, but we haven't seen a school. We haven't seen education. We haven't seen what that looks like. So where is Dina getting an education in the apocalypse that requires or has access to protractors? And in the event that they do have access to protractors, why? Why are we not using skills and resources and education in a way that is informative to be able to protect oneself in the apocalypse? So, for example, I would say relevant math in an apocalyptic situation like this, to me, would be shooting and aiming and like figuring out angles and pressure and things like that. I don't understand. And I don't know if that's something that you need if you're practicing with a gun, because I've never held a gun in my life and I never want to. But I will say this, like, isn't there something to like looking through a scope, and like the scope has little measurement, like a little level in it? This is how inequipped I am to deal with an apocalyptic situation. But I would tell you one thing. In the apocalypse, I'm not using a protractor. I'm just not. Unless we are charting the stars, in which case there has to be other tools that we can find. There's not a single compass left on planet Earth that these people can't leverage, that they need to be using protractors. What are you using a protractor for? And if she would have said something like, well, Joel taught this to me because of being a contractor and the stuff that we were doing as we were rebuilding Jackson, okay, that would make more sense. But she says you're not academically minded, like you're not schoolish, you're not bookish. And that to me is like, why are we learning this in the apocalypse? Okay, anyway, rant over. At the end of this scene, we get this silent communication again between Ellie and Dina. And Dina looks up at Ellie and she goes, Ellie, and just calls her name. And the two of them look at each other and they just start grinning and they're smiling. And this exchange of love is passing between them, again, in a very silent form of communication that women possess. And I will stand by this forever. Women and their silent form of communication is top tier. Then it moves on to scene 3, the stage. And we see Ellie pick up a guitar and she sits down, and it sort of shows like a profile shot of her sitting down. And I just thought this was really great because half of the stage where Ellie is sitting is in this golden light, and the other half, sort of where the audience would be, is all in black. And this to me was like a yin-yang type of experience. Like, we've just had this whole experience last episode where she sang for Dina, but now she's singing to nobody, and she has this connection with Joel through the guitar. So we get Ellie playing Future Days from Pearl Jam, and the first line that she sings, if I ever was to lose you. So we get this light and dark contrast, right? She just had a bright moment where she was able to play guitar for Dina. They're falling in love. They're in love. They're having a baby. Ellie and Dina just had sex for the first time. Maybe Ellie just had sex for the first time ever. We don't know. I don't know how many opportunities a queer woman has to have sex in the apocalypse. We know that there's Kat, but we don't know if she's had sex with her. So I say this because bright, beautiful moment that she gets, and she sits down with the guitar again, and we don't have to go through a whole other song montage. We just get the first line, if I ever was to lose you. And she stops. She stops playing because she can't play anymore. Her grief settles in, and that's where it sort of fades into the dark, right? And that contrast, that this pain, this grief, this overwhelming sense of loss, the space that Joel is left behind, and again, like going into the credits again, where there's not another mushroom person that has popped up next to Ellie, there is just a blank space. There is this immense loss that she has experienced. And as is the way of life, by the way, I always say that like a funeral will bring some of the biggest laughs that we have, or moments of laughter where we are reflecting on how we love and care about this person and the funny stories and anecdotes and things that we have about them. And on our best days, on days where we are having a peak moment in our life experience, there is a doubt or a fear or something that sort of naggles in the back of our brain that's like, it will never be this good again, or when is the other shoe going to drop, or what if it doesn't last forever, or what if I fuck this up? And I think that the silver lining and the dichotomy of what it is to be human and what the life journey requires of us, that we can't know one if we don't know the other, that Ellie could be a person who is having these bright moments and discovering new things to want to live for, right? If we go back again to season 1 and Ellie's like, well, then what is it that you go on for? And Joel says you go on for family. Well, Ellie's forging a new family. She's going to be a dad. And she has these bright moments and bright things to be looking forward to. And yet this family of origin, this original found family, this kindred spirit that she has in Joel, the loss of that and the weight of that loss cannot be diminished. And so that grief and that darkness and that need to see this through to completion, to fulfill something within her that has been torn out of. And that's when Dina comes back in and Ellie's like, did you get more information? Did you figure it out? And Dina goes, yes. And Ellie's like, good. And this is that switch over, sort of like the two drama faces in contrast, or again, that yin and yang, like the happy to the drama or to the sad. And I think that's what makes Ellie such a fascinating and human character. And then it goes into scene 4, which I've titled, Let's Go Be Reckless, because that is one of the quotes from this episode, and I really loved it. So Dina goes on in this scene to describe the scars as Amish. They have no electricity, they have no technology, and she's like, they're sort of cultish, which I find this really interesting. Number 1, how many cults are in the apocalypse? How many cults has Dina encountered that she is aware of what a cult even is in the apocalypse? I mean, again, if we're looking at this world as a Dragonfly and Amber of 2003, I know that there are other cults, but like off the top of my head, there was Scientology, there was Heaven's Gate. So how many people does Dina know that have been inflicted by cult mentality? And what does that look like in the post-apocalyptic world? Like, I wish that this is the stuff that they explored, because I'm like, how do they know what a cult is? Because are people really talking about cults in the same way that we discuss them now, if at all, during the apocalypse? And same thing with Amish people. When Dina's like, they didn't live with electricity, they had no technology, they just wanted to live like it was the 1800s. Well, guess what? Most people, I would say, in the apocalypse probably don't have technology or electricity. Most people, right, would be without these resources. Jackson is an exception to the rule. Jackson is not the whole. Jackson is not what other people in the apocalypse are experiencing. So I don't know if this is a privilege that Dina is experiencing that she doesn't realize other people in the apocalypse don't have these things. But like, even in the game, when you get somewhere as you're going around, you have to like see if there's a generator, figure out how to turn the generator on so that there's power, so that you can have the electricity, or to like turn on the fences or whatever, wherever you may be in the game, and depending on what you're doing and what is in that area. But it's not just like electricity is happening. It's not just like everywhere has electricity, right? Like all of this stuff has crumbled in society, and the stuff that we take for granted now is supposed to be a part of what we reflect on when we're watching something that is an apocalypse show. So when Dina says something like, these scars, these Seraphites are like people like the Amish. Like they don't believe in technology. They don't believe in electricity. It's like, well, most people don't have these things in the apocalypse. Correct? Are we all on board with this? Am I crazy? Because when she said this, I literally paused my TV and I started laughing. I was like, this is ridiculous to me. There's not a choice of whether or not you want to live like it's the 1800s. You're in the apocalypse. There's no resources. Where are you getting all of this stuff? Not everybody is going to have access in these places that they live or that they're able to find safe harbor, that you're going to be able to have access to electricity and technology. So, and maybe just because she lives in Jackson that there is a different understanding of that, but I don't know. This is one of those things that I was like, we didn't need to put it in this way. We didn't need to do it like that. And I also find it hard to believe that Ellie, who is a student of culture, who knew about 80s songs, who has all of these, she's got these cassettes that she listens to when she's in Fedra school. She's got all of these posters. She knows who Sally Ride is. She knows different astronauts. She has an understanding of Mortal Kombat and knew how to play it before she had ever played a video game in her life, most likely because she read about it and was able to gauge information and store that away in her brain. We already know that Ellie is somebody who pays attention to culture. So Ellie would have no understanding of who the Amish people were. Ellie would not find that fascinating. Ellie would not be taught that in her Fedra school. If she's being taught about Sally Ride, are they not talking about other parts of culture that were more relevant in the day-to-day of 2003? I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how relevant 2003 Amish people were to the culture, but my point is, if she knows about Sally Ride, that means that they're learning history. So would they not be talking about groups like this or people that lived like this, or even like making comps to this as they are discussing history in Fedra school? I don't know. But that is a thought that I had. Okay, and then it goes to scene 5, which is Dead Scars, Dead Man. We get the mural that says feel her love. We see the prophet for the Seraphites. And because they have created this graffiti, and again, because there is this insane turf war happening here, unnecessarily, in all of Seattle, they have to be fighting over this one particular location. I really hope that there is an answer to this in like season 3 as they go deeper into the Seraphites and their story with the wolves. Because why are we fighting over this area? Why are we fighting over this land? Once again, Seattle is not big enough for all of us. So we get the mural. It says feel her love. We then get a tag underneath that with graffiti that says feel this bitch. And it's all these dead Seraphites. And this is the title of the episode, Feel Her Love. Upon seeing this and seeing how graphic it is and seeing how violent it is and understanding that there's a real threat here, not just of infected in this building that they are going to scour out, but that once again, people are the threat. And again, to bring it back to season 1, when Ellie's like, I'm cold, can we at least light a fire? And Joel's like, now why am I going to say no? And she's like, other people. And she goes, what are they going to kill us? And he's like, they do much worse. And this is the real threat in the apocalypse, right? It's other people. So we know right away from season 1 that other people are supposed to be this deep threat in the apocalypse in a way that the infected just aren't. And vice versa, that the infected are a threat that just like other people can't possibly be. And what it means to be living in this world. And so they come across this really violent sort of back and forth between the wolves and the Seraphites. And immediately Ellie is like, let's go back. She's not wanting to take herself out of it, but she's like, I'll bring you home. Meaning you, Dina, a pregnant woman who has this weight on your shoulders. This is our baby. It's not obviously hers, but that's how she perceives it. I'm going to be a dad. I will take you out of harm's way. I will come back here and I will handle this alone. And to be quite honest, alone works for Ellie. Alone worked for Ellie for a long time. Ellie was a lone wolf with very few people that have ever been given access to be a part of her pack. Riley was one. Joel became one. That included Tess, who she lost, Joel, who she lost, Riley, who she lost. It also included, for a very brief period of time, Sam and Henry, who she also lost. And now she has Dina, this bright, shining light, this thing that is waiting for her at the end of all of this vengeance is a family and an opportunity to settle down. And she wants to take Dina out of harm's way. But I think because Ellie understands the value of a choice, she has given Dina a choice last episode. I'll give you a choice. What do you want to do? The circumstances have changed. And she does it again here. She gives her a subtle choice and she goes, let's go back. And Dina replies by telling Ellie, I never told you about my first kill. Here's the story. And she goes on to explain that her mom and her sister were killed by a raider, and that Dina, who was a free spirit even then and who wanted to buck the rules even then, left, took a gun, and came home and found this man killing her family, and she shot him and he was surprised, and she goes through this whole story of her first kill. At the end of this monologue, at the end of the speech, she goes, how would I have felt if I had to be held down and forced to watch as they violently killed my family? And she's like, would that have changed things? And she's like, and if that was the case, I would have hunted him down forever. Forever. And in this moment, she puts her and Ellie on the same level. Again, she is creating an us here in this moment where she is saying to Ellie, I understand more than most what this feels like and what you are going through. And I thought this was really interesting because, again, in the official podcast, Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin had this whole conversation about what it is to put yourself in a situation where you can explore a moral consequence via imagination. So they end up having this whole conversation about Dina only having her imagination to rely on, that if she was in the same position as Ellie, if she can empathize with that just enough to understand what that would be like if she hadn't actually killed this person who killed her mom and her sister, what that would be and what she would do. And she can imagine all of these different possibilities of how she would respond to that. And they go and they say that this isn't something that Ellie needs to conjure in her imagination. This is a fact for her. She did go through this experience. And so even though Dina is trying to say, I understand you, we understand each other, I also have a stake in this because I understand how you feel. And on top of that, she loved and cared about Joel. She was a part of this experience. Even though she was knocked out, she was impacted by this. Joel was somebody who was a parent figure to her in many ways. They had movie nights, they had banter, they had a relationship in the 5 years that they spent together in Jackson. He came to care about her and vice versa. So she makes the choice that they go on. But again, what is that going to mean? And if every path has a price, well, what price is Dina going to pay by helping Ellie hunt these people down forever? And then it moves to the next scene, which I titled Inside the Long Something. I love that we get this line where they're starting to strategize. Dina and Ellie are starting to create their plan. And Dina's like, well, that door's open and I'm going to go through there and just see if it's all clear. And Ellie sort of retorts and she's like, yeah, you should do that because you're the one who can't get infected. And I just love how all of these heavier moments are balanced with something that is light and sarcastic and funny. I also love the way that these two strategize together and watching the meeting of the minds, somebody who is really thought-provoked and wants to go A through Z through what this looks like. And then you get somebody like Ellie who's a little bit more impulsive, but has the brawn, like the brains and the brawn together in Dina and Ellie in this context when they're strategizing like this really, really works for me. And it reminds me a little bit of Tess and Joel when Tess is beaten up by those guys in season 1 who rip her off for the battery, and she goes and she's having this conversation with Joel where she's like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then we're going to go find Tommy. And in the interim, you're going to go hurt these guys because I really, really want you to. She like goes through this whole strategy. She's thought of everything. She is the brains. Joel is the brawn. And again, now we're getting this comp here with like Dina is the brains, Ellie is the brawn. Then we get this long hallway. It's isolated. It's giving horror. It's giving like total scary movie vibes. It's giving something is going to pop out at us. It's giving jump scare. None of that happened, but they end up finding themselves in a room where there's a ton of stalkers. And we know from the first episode or the second episode that these stalkers are not only terrifying, but that they are also strategic, that they also create a plan. And not only is there one, there's many. They are surrounded, and we know that Ellie has already lost this battle as somebody who is immune to just the one stalker that was in the first episode. Well, now there's many of them. And to bring Tess back, this idea that Tess in season 1, episode 2, when she is like, oh, you might be immune from getting infected, but you're not immune from getting torn apart. And they also brought it up in the podcast, making that comp too, that has been planted in our heads for a reason, because even though Ellie is immune, she can't always be reckless. She's not immune from being ripped apart, from being torn to pieces. And this is exactly what happens in this moment. She says to Dina, you go and get into safety. I'm going to protect you by being the decoy here. And what she is doing in this moment is sacrificing herself for Dina, because she knows she can be torn apart. She knows she can be hurt by these things. She just knows that she won't be infected in the process. And so she's willing to sacrifice herself. And then we get the shot where the infected on top of the cage that Dina is in starts to pull it open. And in this moment, you can see it in Bella Ramsey's face as Ellie. Ellie knows that she has failed. She has done nothing to keep Dina safe. She's feeling guilty in that moment. Her facial expression is just wonderful. If you can go back, you should watch it because it's just really, really great as she's seeing this one infected start to pull the cage open. And it reminded me so much of the conversation that Joel and Tommy had in season 1 in episode 6, where Joel says, I'm failing in my sleep. And this fear that he has of not being able to keep Ellie safe after he failed to keep Sarah safe. Sarah died in his arms, quite literally. And he's got this fear, and this fear has been following him, and he's had his heart so closed off that he doesn't have to worry about it for so long until he meets Ellie and his heart is wide open and he loves her and he cares about her and he looks at her like a daughter figure, and he goes, I'm failing in my sleep. And so his natural response is to like push away because he doesn't want her to end up killed. He doesn't want her to end up dead. And this fear that he has that he's going to be the cause of that he's not enough to keep her safe in this world. And I just had that line in the back of my head, I'm failing in my sleep, as you watch Ellie's face as the cage starts to come apart. And then we get this sort of foggy, disoriented screen where Ellie, in all of her trauma, thinks that Joel has come to save them, or at least is unable to sort of clarify who this person is in the moment. And it's supposed to look and feel like Joel because Joel has been her protector the entire time. Joel has been the person that she's been able to lean on the entire time. And we had a whole season to show us that this is the relationship that they've cultivated as sort of like father figure and daughter figure, right? So we get the hand, just like we had Joel reaching his hand out to Abby in episode 2. And now we get Jesse, who has come to save Dina and Ellie. And in this moment, coming back to this idea of masculinity and what it is to be in these gender normative roles, Jesse, the man, the legitimate father, biological father of Dina's baby, is the one that saves them and gets them out of the situation that they are only in because Dina loves Ellie, and Ellie must see this through to completion because she loves Joel. So really, really good scene. I hate the stalkers. Cannot recommend. And then we get the next scene, which is all about sacrifice. And we get that Tommy's in town. Tommy and Jesse came together in order to protect Dina and Ellie because they know that there's no possible way that they're doing this and getting out alive. And I really love that Jesse is annoyed with Ellie and that him being annoyed is warranted. But it is also very, very frustrating to watch because he's just done this incredible thing and you want them to sort of like come together as a unit in this moment as like friends or feeling this sense of camaraderie. And instead you get this frustration that is spilling over from Jesse, who doesn't know yet that Dina is pregnant with his child. And I'm interested to see what that conversation and that fallout, if any, is going to look like. He's frustrated with her that she has absolutely put them in, all of them, Jesse, Tommy, Dina, and herself, in this position after last week saying, I will accept whatever the board decides, can't get on board with it, and goes against the town rules and sort of just goes out anyway. And here he is, this person who is connected to heroism, to leadership, coming to save her and coming to save Dina because he loves her and because Ellie is his friend and he loves her too. So the dichotomy again of what it is to be frustrated with somebody that you love and still know that you're willing to show up for them because you love them anyway is really good here. And that tension is just taut enough, just perfect enough in this moment. And then we watch the sacrifice that the Seraphites participate in. And they are religious zealots. They believe, as a unit, these Seraphites believe that they are legitimately cleansing, spiritually, religiously cleansing the wolves of sin. And this is where religious fanaticism becomes horror. And this is like the perfect amount of horror for me. This is so much more chilling to me than zombies. And it's supposed to be in many cases. It's supposed to be. But in this show that focuses on zombies and that has this very real conventional threat that we see in horror movies, I absolutely love when we can see religious fanaticism being driven into a narrative in a way that is so graphic. Because the Seraphites are not any religion that we know. We don't actually know what their rules are. We don't know what their prophet has said. We just understand that they have this concept of sin. They believe the wolves are sinners. And that their way of purifying these people of their sins is by hanging them and disemboweling them. It is gross, it is graphic, it is violent, and it is very much this idea of like, well, what does religion give the person freedom to do? And again, I say freedom in air quotes because it's not like this is a good thing to do. And both sides, by the way, torturing somebody with a pan, like a hot pan, is not a good thing to do. It does not make you a good person. And on the other side, hanging and disemboweling people so that their inners are on their outside, ew, is not a good thing. So it's not like either one of these groups is a victim to the other. It's not like any one of these groups is more powerful than the other. They are both graphic, they are both violent, and they both have an agenda here. And a part of the agenda of the Scars or the Seraphites is this idea of purifying people of sin, and that these are almost like ritualistic sacrifice to the prophet, whoever the prophet may be. We've only ever seen her picture, feel her love, but it's a religious ceremony. These people are in ceremony in the same way that if you go to church, you receive the body of Christ. Like, these people are praying almost in this moment. They are using this experience of hanging and slicing into somebody as an opportunity to give an offering almost to the prophet. And it's graphic and it's violent and it's gross. And I find religious fanaticism to be more scary than anything else that we could see on the show. I felt the same way when we saw David and his cannibals. And turns out they were pretty graphic and disgusting too. So I really, really enjoyed this scene. It's giving you a really strong understanding of how terrifying the Seraphites actually are, like live in person, not just walking into a room and seeing like all of the blood and all of the people hanging up in the spotlights and the show of it that we saw last episode, but to actually witness it in person through the eyes of Ellie and Dina and Jesse was really, really phenomenal. And for those of us who have played the game, or for those who have watched like a walkthrough, just hearing the whistles sent a chill through my body. This is the way that these people communicate. And I'm hoping that by the time we get to the end of season 3, that when people hear these whistles, it's a visceral response for them, because just hearing the whistles and hearing it so clearly did something to me viscerally as a viewer who has watched the game. And then we get this last scene, Ellie's revenge. We see that Dina gets shot. She gets shot basically off screen. It happens quietly. She's just got the arrow in her leg. She passes out, right? And Jesse, once again, the savior, takes her, lifts her up into his arms, and they have to separate. Ellie is like, I will once again sacrifice myself here to be the decoy and to lead them away from you while you go and get her to safety. Wonderful. And as she's doing this, she sees the hospital and immediately abandons her mission to draw the Seraphites away from Dina and Jesse, and immediately makes her mark or her path towards Nora. And if every path has a price, what is the price that she pays on turning her back on her friends in that moment, and her love in that moment, and her family in that moment? So what is that price? And what will the cost be that she pays by abandoning that mission? She finds Nora. She's got her at gunpoint. This is pretty much lifted right from the game. And it's important to remember that when everything was happening with Joel, Nora was the one who held Ellie down and forced Ellie to watch, or at least kept her in a position where she was unable to get up and fight and defend herself. So I say that because you get this moment where you think that Nora is going to sympathize with her, because we know that not everybody was on board with Abby's plan. Like, Abby's plan definitely goes against the grain of some of the people that are in the group with her in the WLF when they approach Jackson. And that there's some discourse between how they want to all handle the situation with Joel. So you get this moment with Nora where Nora's like, I still hear his screams. And you are wondering in just a brief moment if she is as traumatized by watching her friend Abby be as bloodlust as she was, this shark in the water for Joel. And you're wondering if she's actually empathizing with Ellie. And then right from the game, we get the same line, that little bitch got what he deserved. And she attacks Ellie with biohazard chemicals that we see. There's like a biohazard chemical in the background, disinfectant essentially, because she's disinfecting these rags. And now they are running through the hospital. Nora can't find a way out. She's going to be trapped. Instead of facing her impending death, what does she do? She opens the elevator door, jumps onto the elevator shaft. It falls past B1, which we know nothing is there, all the way to B2, where we know that there's spores galore, and immediately becomes infected in this second level where all these spores are happening. And the infection looks different, and I have a lot of questions about this, and we'll talk about it in a second. But we see immediately that she starts coughing and things like that. And then she says to Ellie, "You're the immune girl. You're real." They didn't even know if this was real or not. So it sort of seems like both sides didn't have all of the... Because the fact that Nora doesn't know whether or not Ellie is a real person, that this immune person is almost mythological, insinuates to me that not everybody knew, and that the Fireflies didn't understand who Joel and Ellie were to each other, and that not everybody was given the information that Ellie was there in building, ready to be operated on, that they understand that they saved somebody, but they don't really recognize that she's real. I was confused about this line, like, "You're real." Why is it that they seem mythological when it seems that they have all of the information, unless they didn't? So that to me is something that I also want to like keep my mind on as we approach the end of the season, or, you know, even starting to think ahead for season 3, because we know that the show was renewed for season 3. And then she tries to defend her position of moral superiority, that they had every right to kill Joel because Joel killed everybody in that hospital, including the doctor who he shot in the head. And she goes, that doctor was the only doctor in the world who can create a vaccine off of you, this one person who is immune. To which I will argue, how do we know? Number one, how do we know that they're the only person in the world? I'm sorry, but is this doctor even an immunologist? Is he somebody who can create a vaccine? Like, I don't necessarily believe that this is the rhetoric that we are sticking with in the apocalypse, that there's only one person on all of planet Earth, and that this one person happens to be the only immunologist, or like only person who works in epidemiology, or like anything like that. And we don't even know what type of doctor he was, so we don't even know if that was true or not. In which case I would say, once again, did we need to be so rash in the way that we handled Ellie's immunity? And in this moment, you're getting that information of like, is this the moment that Ellie discovers what Joel's done? And based off of context clues that we've gotten from other conversations and things that have happened earlier in the season, the answer is no. But in this moment, it's confirmed. When Nora says, "Do you know what he did? Do you understand?" Ellie responds, "I know." And then proceeds to go, "Where's Abby?" and goes and finds a pipe that looks a lot like a golf club in its shape, and goes for her legs and starts attacking an already dead woman. This woman who has already been infected with cordyceps. She's already going to be losing her mind, her consciousness. Her eyes are starting to glass over. You can sort of see it. You see that she's coughing, she's twitching, she's starting to lose control of her faculties. And yet, in these final moments, to get whatever she can, Ellie tortures her. And this is how the episode basically ends, except for we get an understanding that there's going to be a flashback next episode, because we see a very young Ellie waking up to Joel at her door, "Hey kiddo," and she's like, "Hi," and it's so sweet and it's so tender and it's so childlike in that moment that you just can't help but wonder, how did we get from that place to here? And that's what I think we'll be exploring in these next 2 episodes before the end of the season. But clearly a Pedro flashback is coming next episode. Anyway, before we end and get into the hot girl hot takes, I just want to say, are these infected different types of infected? The way that the infected that we've understood happen now, cordyceps takes over your brain, right? When you are bitten, there is a certain time lapse. This is shown to us in season 1, episode 1, when we are in the QZ and we see the different places that you can be bit and how long that means that you have to turn. And it's like the neck is like 15 minutes that you have, you know, anything like on your torso, I think is like a day at longest. Your legs, I think, is maybe up to 2 days, but it's like no longer than 2 days that you have to be infected, or like maybe even no longer than 24 hours. I don't know. I'd have to go back and like look at what that time lapse is. But essentially it's like, well, how long does it take from the cordyceps to get through your bloodstream up into your brain? And how long then, once it's in your brain, does it have before it starts to take over? And this is exactly what it does, right? Because when we see the infected, it's the tendrils are coming out of their mouth. The clickers like have their eyes taken over, their whole head taken over by the mushrooms. It's growing from their head, and it sort of takes the body as it goes with it, as it goes down. And that's where like a bloater, for example, would come from. And I'm confused about this type of infected because in the game, when you are infected by spores, you turn into an infected. That's what happens. And here in this show, it seems that these people are not infected in the same way, that they are not primed to attack, because Ellie passes by all of these people, one of them being that woman from the Cold Open's son, who is just planted to the wall, like mushrooms growing out and attaching them to the wall, and they are breathing in normal air, or whatever air is down there, and exhaling spores. And this is just spreading cordyceps all over, which is why B2 literally looks like an infected mushroom labyrinth. That's the word I want to use for it. So I'm thinking that these infected are not infected the same way, meaning that they are not turning into like clickers or stalkers, that they are not poised to attack. These are only infected that their sole purpose, seemingly, is to infect other places just by breathing the spores. So I don't know if they are the same type of infected. I don't know if they eventually then turn into clickers, like when there's nothing left for me to do, there's no spores left for me to breathe. It seems to me like there is no name for it yet, but that there are these different type of infected, and that there's clickers and bloaters and sort of like the zombie-esque, and then there's stalkers now who are sort of advanced or more strategic and intellectual, if we can call it that. And now it seems that there's a very different type of infected whose purpose is to spread the infection via these spores. And I have a lot of questions about this. I'm curious if we'll see more of it. I'm sure we will, but it's a matter of when. We only have 2 episodes left, and now we have this introduction to what spores are, so it will be interesting to see what they do with this over the next 2 episodes. Okay, that is our Femme Frame for this week. That was our Slay by Slay breakdown of the episode. We will go into my hot girl hot takes. These are my instant reaction notes that don't make the cut for the episode. I'm sorry, but I would be leaving Seattle immediately and finding somewhere else remote. This is my reaction to finding out about spores in the cold opening. I had one single note that said, "Oh my God, sweet Jesus." I don't know where that was or what it was meant to be for, but I was just laughing as I reflected on it this morning. I also have a note that was 3 caballeros, okay? Because I don't know if it was just on my mind from Cinco de Mayo earlier this week, but watching Dina, Jesse, and Ellie like run through the forest together, I was just like, They say we are birds of a feather, which is my Disney coded brain for you, that I would be singing the Three Caballeros. I know Jesse was mad at them, but I was like, oh, look at the three birds of a feather, the thruple, right? Here they are coming together. And that was just my hot girl hot take on that note. I have a note that says, Tati Gabrielle, hi baby, I love you. I love her so much. I think she is wonderful. I love her in everything that she does. And I hope that we get to see more of her in flashbacks now that she is presumably dead. I also wrote, did they just release the spores into the hospital by going down into this B2 level and like opening the elevator shaft? So if every path, once again, has its price, is the price of running away from Ellie, or is the price of killing Nora at the expense of making this infection now airborne to the rest of the people that are in the hospital? I don't know, but just something to consider. Also, are we going to see Tati as a zombie? Because we saw her turning, but it'd be really interesting to see if that's all we get, or is there more, or is she dead because of Ellie? I don't know. Anyway, those are my hot girl hot takes. I have just one last note. If you are looking for a book that gives you the same vibes as The Spores, I highly recommend Mexican Gothic. It was just giving me the same vibes as we were watching this episode. I kept thinking about it. It was on the top of my mind. Okay? Let's crack open the burn book where we look at the superlatives for this week's episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. When Ellie says, "Where's Abby?" with the red light on and her eyes are just so dark and her face is so stoic, and she just keeps saying it over and over again, "Where's Abby? Where's Abby?" Bold and Bothered. Loved that so much. The Shiro Award goes to the mom who obviously sacrifices her son to the spores. The Femme Fatale Award. Ellie silently sacrificing herself to the stalkers in order to save Dina. Speak Your Truth Trophy. When Ellie says, "I know," after this monologue that Nora gives about Joel and what Joel has done, I had chills. I know we just discussed this like 5 minutes ago in the episode, but literally when she's like, "I know," I had chills through my body. I loved this so much. Honorary heartthrob. When we get this moment between Dina and Ellie where Dina says, "Don't get angry. You're a little crazy, and that's exciting. It's one of the many reasons that I love you." And she gives that whole speech, and all Ellie hears in that is, "You love me?" And she goes to reply with, "I love you too." And Dina goes, "Oh, I know." And it was just giving me Han Solo vibes when Leia's like, "I love you." And he's like, "I know." I just love that she's like, "It's one of the reasons that I love you." And just the tenderness and the softness that Ellie responds with when she's like, you love me?" And just watching that register on her face and what that means and what it means that she's felt this way about Dina for a while and now gets to explore this relationship with her. I just thought it was so great. All right. And that is this week's episode of Femme and Furious. If you like this episode, share it out with your friends. Tag me on social media at Femme and Furious Pod. And I will see you later this week. We will be doing an episode on Thursday about fan fiction and how fan fiction is shaping the book world right now and how it has always shaped us as women. And then I will see you again on Monday for The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6. We are nearing the end. The next series that we are doing is all of Emily Henry's books. So I already did a single standalone episode that was on her latest book, Great Big Beautiful Life. But she also has another 5 rom-coms. She's been releasing about a book every year since 2020. It started with Beach Read. It ended with her most recent one, but there's 5 books in between. So in June, we will be doing all 5 of those books. It is Beach Read, it is the people we meet on vacation, it is book lovers, it is happy place, it is funny story, and then if you want to read her newest book, Great Big Beautiful Life, that is a separate episode. I changed our structure a little bit because originally I was going to be doing From Blood and Ash because the last book in that series was supposed to be releasing in June, but the author has now just pushed it off until September. So we will be doing all of that. In July, we are doing Twilight. So if you want to get a jump start on some of that content, or if you want to send me an email, we are going to do some mailbag episodes. You've got mailbag episodes. If you want to send me some emails about Emily Henry's books, or if you want to send me some emails about Twilight, I just want to let you know the inbox is open at femmeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. I will see you next week, and until then, may she guide us.